Welcome to Hard Script.
I found out my wife was on Tinder the same way you find out a fire started in your house, by noticing the smoke, not the flame. It started with a phone buzz. We were watching a movie, or pretending to. Her phone lit up with a notification she tried to swipe away too fast. I saw the logo. I wasn't even sure at first. Red and white, unmistakable. Tinder. I didn't say anything. I didn't ask. I just smiled to myself and got up for a glass of water. Because at that moment, something in me turned. Not broke, just shifted. We've been married for 6 years. Together for 9. Her name's Lauren. She used to laugh with her whole body. Used to pull me back into bed on Monday mornings. Used to make me feel like I mattered. But lately, I felt more like a subscription she forgot she was paying for. A few months ago, she started dressing different when she went out. More polished. More strategic. But at home? Sweatpants, silence, and I'm tired. Still, I gave her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she was stressed. Maybe we needed space. Maybe we were just in a slump. But that notification? That was no slump. That was a decision. Later that night, while she was brushing her teeth, she left her phone on the nightstand. Unlocked. A rookie mistake. I opened the app. I saw the profile. Lauren, 32. Recently exploring life again. Looking for connection, not complications. That last line hit like a brick. Photos I hadn't even seen before. A solo vacation pic in Sedona. A gym mirror shot. A flirty look I hadn't been on the receiving end of in months. It wasn't subtle. And it wasn't new. She walked back into the room. Froze. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, phone in hand. She didn't scream. Didn't snatch it. She just let out a sigh. Tired, rehearsed. Then she said it. I just needed to feel something again. No apology. No panic. Just that line. Like she'd been waiting for me to find out, so she could finally be done pretending. I stood up. Handed the phone back. No words. No fight. Just walked past her like she was furniture. She asked if we could talk. I didn't even turn around. Because when a woman puts herself back on the market while wearing your ring, there's nothing left to discuss. That night, I lay in bed next to her, staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathe like nothing happened. But something had happened. Not outside the marriage, inside me. That was the night I started disappearing. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. She thought I'd scream, beg, threaten. But I'd already made my decision. I wouldn't yell. I'd leave quietly. And when I left, it would be like I was never there at all. She didn't ask if I was okay the next morning. She asked if I wanted pancakes. Like that made sense. Like syrup could patch a marriage. I said I wasn't hungry and left for work earlier than usual. Not because I needed to. Because I didn't want to be around her silence pretending to be peace. That day, I didn't text her once. Didn't check in. Didn't ask if she needed anything. Didn't send a stupid meme just to feel connected. By noon, I had already rerouted part of my direct deposit to a new account. One she didn't know about. It wasn't revenge. It was preparation. I started treating every shared detail of our life like a thread I needed to untie. That night, she sat on the couch in the clothes she used to wear for dates. Not for comfort, not even for me. I knew better. It was for attention. She kept checking her phone, acting like she wasn't waiting for me to notice. I walked in, took off my shoes, grabbed a bottle of water, and said nothing. You're quiet, she said finally. I just nodded and walked into the kitchen. She followed. Are we going to talk about last night? I opened the fridge, took out leftovers, and started heating them up. I'm serious, Adam. I turned to her for the first time and spoke with all the calm I had left. You made your profile. You wrote the bio. You picked the pictures. You made it very clear what you're looking for. So no, I don't think there's anything left to talk about. She looked at me like she expected me to explode. Maybe she thought if I screamed, it would mean I still cared. But I didn't give her that. I just turned back to the microwave and waited for it to beep. That silence. That's when she started to realize she had misread me. Lauren had always been good at manipulating emotion, crying when things got too close, accusing me of being controlling if I asked too many questions, playing the victim when I was too tired to fight. But this time, I wasn't playing. I wasn't emotional. I was done. She didn't say another word that night. I ate alone, showered, got in bed, and scrolled through job listings in another city. Not because I was leaving yet, but because I needed to remind myself that I could, that I had options. The next morning, she left early. I stayed behind and started sorting through files, documents, passwords, insurance. I logged out of our shared streaming services. Changed the passwords. She'd find out soon enough. By the end of the week, I stopped referring to anything as ours. It was my car, my account, my weekend. She noticed. She just didn't know what to do about it. And that's when it started. Not a fight, not a meltdown, just the unraveling. She began to feel what she thought only I had felt all these months. What it means to be invisible, to be tolerated, to be an afterthought. She just didn't know this was only the beginning. It didn't take long for the shift in energy to rattle her. Lauren had built her comfort on routine, on my predictability. She knew I'd come home by 6, ask about her day, cook if she didn't feel like it, fold her laundry without comment, smile through her passive jabs. She'd mistake all of it for love, but really, it was obligation wearing a tired face. That week, I broke the pattern. I got home later each night. Didn't offer explanations. She tried to ask once, something casual like, "Everything okay at work?" I just said, "Yep," and walked past her. She started setting the table for 2 again. I ate at the counter with my headphones in. She left a bottle of wine open with 2 glasses. I poured myself water. She wore makeup to dinner. I didn't look up from my plate. She didn't know what to do with that. And that's when I realized something she probably didn't even know about herself. She never wanted love. She wanted power. Power in the form of validation, attention, emotional leverage. She wanted to be wanted, even when she didn't want me. And I had fed her that power for years. Every time I overlooked the emotional withdrawal. Every time I blamed myself. Every time I tried harder. But now, I wasn't giving her a single drop of that power. And she felt it. One night, I came home and found her standing in the hallway. Not angry. Not distant. Nervous. Like she was about to audition for a role she wasn't sure she could play. She said she missed the way things used to be. I didn't answer. I just placed my keys in the bowl and went to shower. Later, I found her sitting in bed, waiting. She asked if I was mad at her. I said no, just done being disappointed. Then I turned off the light and laid on my side without touching her. That night, she didn't sleep. I could feel it in her breathing. The way she shifted, waiting for something from me. A word. A gesture. A crack in the wall. She got nothing. This wasn't a tantrum. It was strategy. The quiet kind. The kind that replaces begging with boundaries. That speaks through changed behavior instead of raised voices. I wasn't punishing her. I was removing her from the center of my world. And she hated it. Because the one thing she never expected was to become optional. The next day, she checked my phone. She didn't even try to be subtle. I had nothing to hide, but I left it there on purpose. Let her dig through the silence. Let her feel what it was like to search for something and find emptiness. Just like I had. She wasn't scared I'd cheat. She was scared I wouldn't care. And that's exactly where I wanted her. She thought silence was a phase. A punishment. A tactic to get her to say sorry and reset the board. But the truth was, there was no board anymore. I wasn't playing. I stopped noticing the things she did on purpose. The makeup, the perfume, the sudden interest in asking if I needed anything from the store. It was all background noise. That's what she had turned me into, after all. Background noise. Now she was just hearing her own echo. Lauren wasn't used to being ignored. Not really. She built her identity on being the gravity in every room, pulling people in without asking. Her friends followed her. Her coworkers deferred to her. And for years, I did too. Until I didn't. That weekend, she tried again. Suggested we get out of the house. Said we hadn't had dinner together in a while. I agreed. But I made a reservation for one. I went to the steakhouse down the street. Sat at the bar. Ate slow. Tipped well. Took the long way home. When I walked in, she was sitting at the table in a dress she hadn't worn in years. Candles lit. Wine breathing. I said, "I already ate," and went upstairs. She didn't follow. She knew better now. The next morning, I started packing the guest room. Not loudly. Not messily. Just quietly folding what was mine and putting it in a place that wasn't ours. She saw it, said nothing. But I noticed she stopped wearing her ring that week. Like removing it before I could ask was some form of control. Fine. She could take it off. I had already taken off much more. At work, I filed the paperwork to transfer a portion of my retirement out of the joint trust. At home, I backed up all documents, photos, files. Every shared login got a new password. I wasn't hiding. I was preparing. She asked if I was okay again. Same words. Same tone. I just looked at her and said, I'm adjusting. And I was. To a version of life that didn't orbit around her moods, her needs, her half-hearted affection. She had spent so long withholding herself like it was currency, expecting gratitude for scraps. But that economy collapsed the moment I stopped trading. She wasn't losing me to another woman. She was losing me to peace, to mornings that didn't start with tension, to evenings that didn't feel like negotiations, to a version of myself that didn't need her approval to feel whole. That scared her more than anything, because she could fight a rival, but she couldn't fight my indifference. And indifference? That's what finally started breaking her. The silence was no longer passive. It had weight. It pressed on her from all directions. And for the first time, I saw her shift from frustration to fear. Not the dramatic kind. Not screaming or begging. Just subtle moves. Lingering glances. Unasked questions. The small signs of someone who knows something's slipping through their fingers, and they can't name it. She started waking up earlier, sitting at the kitchen table with her coffee already made when I walked in. She used to sleep through my mornings like I didn't exist. Now she was alert, watching, listening for something that would tell her if I was gone yet. But I had already left. I just hadn't moved out. One evening, I came home to the smell of dinner. Not takeout, not leftovers. She had cooked, something she hadn't done in months, maybe longer. There were candles, real silverware, jazz playing low from the Bluetooth speaker she used to reserve for parties. I didn't say a word. She sat across from me, waiting for me to react. Maybe she expected a compliment, a thank you, a smile, something to tell her she was still relevant. I ate in silence, then rinsed my plate, set it in the dishwasher, and walked to the living room. She followed, of course, asked if something was wrong. I told her no, nothing was wrong, because by then, everything had already broken. I wasn't cold out of cruelty. I was cold because I had no warmth left to offer. You don't keep feeding someone who's been throwing your meals in the trash for years. Eventually, you just stop cooking. And that's exactly what I had done. Emotionally, mentally, spiritually. She tried to hold my hand on the couch. I moved it to scratch my leg. Never looked at her. She sat there for a long time. I could feel her staring. She finally whispered that she missed me. I didn't reply. The next day, I noticed she had started dressing down again. Not because she was comfortable, but because the effort hadn't worked. The makeup, the dresses, the fake domestic warmth. It didn't shake me, and she didn't know how to process that. Because for the first time in our marriage, I wasn't reacting. That was the fracture. The moment she realized I wasn't trying to fix it anymore. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't even angry. I was just finished. And she wasn't ready for that. Because all her power came from my desire to keep us alive. Now she was facing a version of me she never imagined. A man who could love deeply, lose completely, and still walk away without a sound. She used to look at me like I was background. Now she couldn't stop watching me. Every move, every silence, every delayed reply, it all rattled her. She started asking things she never used to care about. Where I was going, what I was doing after work, who I was texting. I kept my answers short, clean, unemotional, just enough to be polite, never enough to be intimate. Because intimacy had left the building the night I saw her Tinder profile. And she knew it. One evening, I came home to find the closet rearranged. Not hers, mine. My clothes moved to different hangers, color-coded. My gym shoes placed neatly by the door. My cologne sitting center on the dresser, like a reminder. A signal. She wanted me to feel seen again. But it was too late. Because once a man realizes he's been invisible for too long, you can't make him unsee it. That same night, she asked if I was happy. I just said, getting there. It was the most honest answer I could give. Lauren didn't reply. She just nodded, forced a smile, and walked out of the room. I think that's when it really hit her. She wasn't dealing with the version of me who argued, or cried, or begged for clarity. That man was gone. In his place was someone measured, silent, focused. And that silence? It echoed louder than any fight we'd ever had. Over the next few days, she tried again. Small things. Made my coffee. Left the TV on my favorite channel. Cleaned the garage, something I'd asked her to help with for 2 years. I noticed. I just didn't react. Because it wasn't love. It was damage control. She wasn't trying to fix the relationship. She was trying to fix her image of herself. trying to believe she wasn't the one who broke something real. But deep down, she knew. You don't go fishing for strangers on dating apps if your house isn't already on fire. You don't look for a connection unless you've already disconnected from the person in front of you. And now, she was finally looking at herself through the lens I'd been forced to live with for years. Detached, dismissive, disinterested. The difference? I never said it out loud. I just lived with it. Until I didn't. Now she was the one pacing through rooms, trying to find meaning in silence. Trying to interpret a look. A pause. A missing goodbye. But I had nothing left to explain. She handed me a loaded weapon when she opened that app. I didn't fire it. I just laid it on the table. And walked away. It was subtle at first. A missed alarm. A tear she thought I didn't see. A glass of wine at noon on a Tuesday. Lauren was unraveling, thread by thread, but doing everything she could to act like she wasn't. She still posted pictures, smiled for selfies, shared motivational quotes online about healing and strength. But inside our house, the silence between us was a different kind of mirror, and she couldn't look into it without flinching. The woman who once said she needed space was now trying to fill every room I entered. I'd wake up early. She'd be in the kitchen already. I'd go to the gym. She'd swing by to drop something off. I'd sit in the backyard to clear my head. She'd wander out with a drink and pretend it was coincidence. But none of it worked. Because I wasn't avoiding her. I was finished with her. She mistook that for distance. But it was detachment. There's a difference between not speaking because you're angry and not speaking because you've already said everything you needed to say, just not with words. One night, I heard her crying in the bathroom. The quiet kind. The kind you do when you're ashamed to admit you don't know how to fix what you broke. I didn't knock. Didn't ask. Didn't comfort. Because comfort is for people who are hurting. And I wasn't hurting anymore. I was healing. In the spaces where I used to chase her, I was rebuilding myself. My habits. My focus. My peace. I started running in the mornings. Started sleeping deeper. I even laughed again, genuinely, while watching an old sitcom I hadn't touched in years. That moment shocked me. Not because I laughed, but because I realized how long it had been, and how she hadn't even noticed when I stopped. The real crack didn't come from her breakdown. It came from a question she asked a few days later. She stood in the hallway, arms crossed, voice small. Is there someone else? I almost laughed. Not out of mockery, out of disbelief. For a woman who had downloaded Tinder while lying next to me in bed, the irony was rich. But I didn't laugh. I just looked at her and said, there doesn't need to be. That broke her more than any yes ever could, because it meant the threat wasn't a person. It was my absence. She had created a space so cold, so dismissive, so transactional, that I had stopped being hers. Not because someone else stepped in, but because she pushed me out. And now, she couldn't find the door back in. The final shift wasn't dramatic. No slammed doors. No screaming match. No midnight confessions. It was a Tuesday. She left for work. Hair done. Lipstick perfect. A little too perfect, if I'm being honest. Like she was trying to remind the world, and maybe herself, that she still had control. But control had slipped. Not loudly. Quietly. Like water draining from a glass she didn't realize was cracked. As soon as the door closed behind her, I opened the drawer where I kept everything important. I took out the manila envelope I had prepared weeks earlier. Inside, copies of account changes, my new lease, and a letter. Not emotional. Not bitter. Just a simple, final line. You can't lose what already walked away. That afternoon, I packed. Efficient. Clean. Every item I took had intention. Every item I left behind, a message. I wasn't just moving out. I was shedding skin. Photos. Gone. Keys. Replaced. Passwords. Changed. Utilities. Split. The life we built together wasn't being burned. It was being archived. When she came home, the house wasn't empty. But it felt hollow. My shoes weren't by the door. My jacket wasn't on the hook. No scent of coffee brewing for the next morning. No background music from my laptop. No quiet buzz of my routines. Just a note on the table. The envelope beneath it. I wasn't there to see her read it. That wasn't the point. This wasn't for closure. It was for conclusion. Because closure implies something still lingers. A door slightly ajar. A thread you might tug at when the nights get cold. But this was the end of the book. The same night she found the envelope, she called. 3 missed calls. 2 texts. Can we talk? Please. Just talk. I didn't respond. Not out of cruelty. Out of consistency. I had spent years talking, explaining, pleading in silence, trying to earn connection from someone who treated affection like a prize you win by staying quiet long enough. Now, the silence belonged to her, and she didn't know how to survive it. The next morning, I turned off my phone, walked into my new place. A small apartment. Nothing impressive, but it was mine. Every corner of it. Every drawer. Every inch of space. No ghosts. No tension. Just air. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was borrowing someone else's peace. I had built my own. She didn't lose me because of one app, one conversation, one night. She lost me because she stopped seeing me long before I stopped standing there. And by the time she noticed, I was already gone. It happened 5 days after I left. A knock on my apartment door at 8:47 p.m. I knew who it was before I even stood up. There was no message, no call ahead. Just that quiet desperation people carry when they realize they've run out of excuses. I opened the door. Lauren stood there. No makeup. Hoodie. Hair tied back like she hadn't touched it in hours. In her hand, a thin white pharmacy bag crumpled at the top. Her eyes looked different, less polished, more human. For a second, I wondered if she'd speak. She didn't. She just held out the bag. Inside was a pregnancy test. Positive. I didn't flinch. Didn't ask questions. Didn't rush to hug her or demand answers. I just looked her in the eye, calm, steady, and waited. She broke first. Said she was scared. That she didn't know. That it might be mine, might not. That she hadn't done anything serious. Just had been lost. Words stumbled out of her like she was trying to erase months of silence with 3 minutes of panic. I didn't respond. I stepped aside. Let her in. Not because she belonged there, but because I wanted her to sit in the echo of everything she destroyed. She moved to the couch, sat stiff, hands folded in her lap like a child waiting for punishment. She asked if I was angry. I said no. Anger requires expectation. I had none left. Then came the question I knew was coming. What are you going to do? I looked at her and said, exactly what I've been doing. That confused her. She thought the test would break through the wall, that it would wake me up, pull me back in, force a reaction. But she misunderstood something fundamental. I didn't leave to punish her. I left to save myself. The test didn't change anything. It wasn't a beginning. It was another ending. Because even if it was mine, especially if it was mine, I wouldn't raise a child in the shadow of that kind of betrayal. Not in a house where love was conditional, where affection was transactional, where being seen came only after being ignored. She thought the test would reset the board, but there was no game left to play. I told her I'd do what was right, whatever that looked like. Legal, responsible, fair. But that didn't include pretending, didn't include coming back. She left that night with tears in her eyes and the test still in her hand. And I watched her walk away the same way I once walked down that hallway months ago, quietly, without looking back. Because sometimes, rock bottom doesn't make people change. It just makes them louder. Weeks passed. Not one phone call. Not one update. The test remained a question mark, suspended between us like a story with no final chapter. But I didn't chase it. Didn't ask for answers. I had already lived in the uncertainty long enough. Now I was living in clarity. That clarity changed me. Not overnight, but steadily. I started working out again, not to distract myself, but to reclaim something. My mornings were mine. My space, quiet. No passive-aggressive sighs. No cold shoulders. No walking on eggshells. Just air. Clean and still. People at work noticed. I was sharper. Quieter, yes, but more present. I said less and meant more. I no longer entertained fake smiles or pointless small talk. I had learned how much noise people use to cover up the truth. My truth was this: I was free. Not because I'd found someone else. Not because I'd forgotten. But because I'd finally remembered who I was before I bent myself into someone she could barely tolerate. She, on the other hand, became a ghost. Friends asked why she wasn't around. Her social media went dark. I heard through a mutual friend that she wasn't doing well, emotionally, mentally, even physically. That she cried a lot. That she'd stopped showing up to things she used to dominate. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. I just listened. Because this wasn't about revenge. It was about release. One night, I got a letter. Handwritten. No return address. No dramatic opening. Just 10 lines, shaky and unfinished. She said the test was real. She said it wasn't mine. She said she was sorry. No explanation. No follow-up. Just those 3 punches wrapped in cursive. I folded the letter once, placed it in a drawer, and went on with my night. Not because I didn't care, but because I had already buried the man who would have unraveled over it. The man who would have screamed, demanded names, begged for reasons. That man died the night she swiped right on someone else while lying next to me. What she didn't realize, what most people never do, is that the most dangerous kind of man isn't the one who explodes. It's the one who vanishes. The one who rewrites his life while you're still rereading the last chapter. The one who learns silence is not weakness, but power. Because silence makes them hear their own choices, louder than any words ever could. She left me long before I left her. I just gave her what she thought she wanted. And when she finally heard the echo of her own decisions, she realized it was her voice, bouncing back in an empty room. Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories.